Fine, thank you. Let's make a start, everyone. I declare the ordinary council meeting of 15 February 2022 open. The time now is 6:01 p.m. by my reckoning. In accordance with the state government COVID directives, I'll be removing my mask and have done to speak and chair this meeting to ensure that communication in this meeting is clear for those who are hard of hearing and visibility of the speaker's mouth is essential, and for those listening at home on our live stream, and will also be relying on clear communication. We acknowledge, as we always do, the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land. We also pay our respects to elders both past and present. May I ask everyone present please to turn off all electronic devices including mobile phones, iPads and tablets for the duration of the meeting. Tonight's council meeting is being recorded. A copy of the audio recording shall be available on the city's website within 72 hours of the meeting. The remainder of the disclaimer can be seen on screen. At item 2 and 2.1 apologies, I do have apologies this evening from Councillor Jacobs and also from Councillor Sweeney, both of whom are unable to be with us this evening. Approved leave of absence, there is none. Disclosures of interest, Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have two disclosures of interest this evening. The first being from Deputy Mayor Ben Kunze, and that relates to an item where he's declaring an impartiality in regard to the adoption of the minutes. And the second is an impartiality declaration for myself into report CC 00222.
Thank you. At declarations of interest financial, of course, there are none. The CEO has addressed the interests that have been declared. At item 4, announcement by the presiding member without discussion. I do have a few words to say, and mostly because today is the very first council meeting of the new year, and I think it's an opportunity for me to address residents on the year that was, and also to assure residents that your council has taken steps to address concerns regarding the city's financial sustainability, perhaps over the past decade. With this in mind, back at the ordinary council meeting held in May 2021, Council adopted a comprehensive report titled Reframing the Long-Term Financial Plan, which recognised deficiencies, acknowledged the adverse and ongoing financial effect of the COVID pandemic, and also set about establishing a plan to ensure a sound financial future for this city. The report sought to reframe the long-term financial plan of 2017 to 2027 by addressing issues with the city's financial position over the previous decade, and its adoption by Council has set the City of Canning on a path of long-term sustainable financial management. Since this time, considerable progress has been made, some of which is reflected in the achievements noted in the financial year 2020 to 21 annual report, as well as delivered in the adoption of the city's financial year 2021 to 22 annual budget. The progress to date includes a general reduction in employee costs of 5.3%, with other restructuring initiatives already underway in 2022. The repayment of an internal loan of $1.5 million that had been used to support the city's aged care services. A significant reduction of the city's reported carry-forward deficit of from $1.38 million to just $45,000. And I'm proud to inform that these gains were delivered without a reduction of service and without decreasing capital spending. At a special council meeting to be held on the 24th of February this year, Council will be presented a long-term financial plan premised on the principles that Council adopted in May 2021. That plan will ensure that the City of Canning returns to a financially sustainable position, delivers services that meet communities' expectations in a financially responsible manner, and that by 2025 to 2026, the city's financial position will be able to generate operating surpluses. For the record, and to correct misinformation being spread on social media, the city's financial health indicator, known as the FHI, is only one measurement of a local government's financial position. External factors such as the unforeseen financial effect of the COVID pandemic, which significantly disrupted the city's revenue for long periods, must also be taken into account. Despite those disruptions, particularly in the final quarter of the 2019-20 financial year, the city's FHI of 68 in 2019-20 was still well above the state average score of 64, and it is significantly above the City of Canning's FHI scores of just 48 in 2012-13 and 55 and 54 in 2014-15 and 2015-16 respectively. We're certainly heading in the right direction. It's to be noted that in the same 2019-20 period, many other local governments were also below the benchmark score of 70, including Fremantle at 54, South Perth 59, Victoria Park 53, Vincent 46, Stirling 69, Coburn 62, and Cambridge at 69. And this confirms that the FHI cannot be taken in isolation as the sole indicator of a local government's financial position. The long-term financial plan to be presented to Council on February 24 outlines a clear path to a sustainable financial future, and I'm pleased to advise that it projects an FHI of more than 75 by 2024. This really is a pleasing outcome. I'm entirely confident in the City's projected financial roadmap, which shows a strong and sustainable position, and I do not agree with the ill-informed commentary on the matter by particular individuals. Canning's standing as a leading Band 1 local government authority is undoubted, and it's reinforced by the interest and investment in the city by state and federal governments, by the business community and by the many new residents who have chosen Canning as their home. And residents should also be immensely proud of that fact. This confidence in our future is illustrated by the extraordinary commitment by WA Labor and the federal Liberal government, amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars, to fund the elevation of the Armidale Railway line through Canning, and the construction and design of new train stations at both Queen's Park and also at Cannington, right in the heart of our $85 million city centre project. It's also illustrated by work commencing on the $32 million State Football Centre in Queen's Park, Metronet taking shape along Ranford Road in Canning Vale, the construction of the new Ranford Road traffic bridge and the new Ranford Road station. Council's commitment to the playground renewal program, which has already seen significant playground upgrades in many Canning suburbs, and in 2022 will see the next round of playground renewals in Canning Vale, Ferndale, Rossmoyne, Willetton and also Wilson. The finalisation of the $20 million Willetton Sports Precinct project in Willetton occurred, and also the imminent opening of the city's multi-million-dollar intercultural centre in Bentley, of which Council is very proud of. Securing funding and support for these projects from our hard-working state and federal government representatives really was a remarkable achievement for the City of Canning, which will now provide benefit to our residents for generations to come. In closing, I'm pleased to advise that the Court of Disputed Returns has recently made an order to dismiss an action brought against the Western Australian Electoral Commission by Shelley resident Richard Aldridge, which sought to have the result of the City of Canning's October 2021 local government elections ruled invalid. Mr Aldridge lodged a Section 4.80 application before the court alleging that the endorsement of several candidates by me, City of Canning Mayor Patrick Hall, breached the role of Mayor as defined in Section 2.8 of the Local Government Act. The application was dismissed by the court on February 7 after Mr Aldridge withdrew his complaint. In my opinion, the action taken by Mr Aldridge was ill-informed, given that the endorsement of candidates is commonplace across all levels of government. We are a democracy after all. I'm also disappointed that Mr Aldridge has taken every available opportunity to publicly espouse and publish his unfounded claim that I had acted illegally by breaching the provisions of the Local Government Act, and that based on his allegation, the election results should be put aside. He continued to air those allegations despite overwhelming evidence available to the contrary. It's not my place to question the motive behind the court action taken by Mr Aldridge, but I am pleased, genuinely, that the dismissal of the matter by the Court of Disputed Returns has finally put this unnecessary episode to bed. Now let us move on to the business of tonight's meeting. A report of delegates without discussion. Any elected member wish to present a delegate's report this evening? At item 5, no. Question time for the public. At item 6, responses to previous questions taken on notice. I note correspondence in relation to Mr Steve Walker, and I might just put the matter to Director Bowe, who I know may want to say a few words in relation to that. Director Bowe, can I refer to you? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I draw the meeting's attention to item 6.1, where the staff response to a question taken on notice indicates that we were unable to locate the correspondence submitted by Mr Walker. Since documenting and completing that search, Mr Walker has validated that he in fact did make a submission on or around the 21st of March 2021. The submission raised no objection to the proposed sale of land, but I'd like to take this opportunity to apologise to Mr Walker and to reassure him that the minutes will be corrected to confirm that he did indeed make a submission on that matter. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. That will obviously be noted in the minutes of this meeting. Thank you, Director Bowe. Questions from the public. I open question time now. The time is 6:12 p.m. The time set aside for public questions is up to 15 minutes, which may be extended if necessary. For recording purposes, please state your name and address and then proceed to ask your question. If an answer cannot be provided at tonight's meeting, the question will be taken on notice and an answer will be provided at the next ordinary council meeting. In accordance with policy ADO2, members of the public who have registered their questions with the City's administration shall be called upon in the order in which registrations were received. Written questions will precede verbal questions. The City has received notification of 2 residents that wish to ask questions, being Mr and Mrs Aldridge. Mr Aldridge, can I ask you to please step forward?
Mrs Aldridge first.
Oh, sorry, I've got Marnie Aldridge first, sorry. Mrs Aldridge, can you please step forward and identify yourself to the meeting and ask your questions?
Good evening, Mr Mayor, Interim CEO Kane, Councillors, City of Canning officers and members of the public. My name is Marnie Aldridge and I live at Minota Avenue, Shelley. My first question, at the last 4 annual electors meetings I've always attended, I was asked to sign an electoral roll. Was there a register for this year's electors meeting on the 2nd of February?
CEO, are you able to answer that question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wasn't at the meeting. I was on leave at that time. I'd have to ask the acting CEO, Mr Bride, if he or governance were aware.
Director Bride?
Through Mr Mayor, yes, there was an electoral roll there.
Thank you.
Okay, I wasn't
Second
actually
question.
approached to sign it, so do I have to find someone to sign it? I don't think anyone came around with a clipboard to sign.
Sorry.
Was that everyone signed?
Director Bride.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, it's a requirement for all attendees at the electors meeting who wish to vote and speak on a matter to be on the electoral roll, and that's an obligation of the resident to make sure that they are on the electoral roll. Obviously, if you weren't checked specifically, there's no issue as long as you know that you are an elector. That's the main. It's your obligation to only participate if you are an elector.
Okay, so there's a list of names.
Thank you.
Okay. My second question is, once again, with every annual electors meeting that I've been to over the years, it's been usual practice to do questions first and then motions, but for this year, the motions went first, and usually it also said who voted against first and then for. I don't recall there actually ever being a motion voted this way in council. Why was this change made, and whose decision was this?
The order of business is determined by the presiding member.
Okay. Number 3, if an elector's motion is made by a family member from a councillor, does that councillor need to state impartiality at a later date when that motion is raised in council?
CEO, specifically in relation to the AGM.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. If an item is brought back before council in which it does refer to some form of family relationship, it would be normal for the individual to make an impartiality declaration. Of course, if there's a financial interest, then they have to make an indirect declaration of financial interest.
Okay,
So
thank you
yes,
very much.
thank you, Mrs Aldridge. Mr Aldridge?
Good evening, Council. When Director Gary Adams left his position as Director here at the City of Canning and his position became vacant, where and when and on what dates was the senior position advertised?
CEO, are you able to advise the meeting?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The position has not been advertised. It has been filled, as the custom was, by the CEO, initially on an interim basis by an external party, in that case being myself. It's now being filled, as you'd be aware, by Mr Bowe, who is acting in that role until such time as the City completes other recruitment practices.
Your second question, Mr Aldridge?
Just of a matter of interest, I sent Councillor Hardeep Singh, as a member of the CEO selection panel, an email today with links to media articles surrounding the dismissal of CEO Kane from Coburn in his official City of Canning Councillor email address. I wanted to know if you actually received it or if that email was intercepted by City staff under the instructions of CEO Kane.
I'm going to rule that question out of order. I don't think it's appropriate. I think under section 4.5 in brackets 3 of the standing orders, a question may be ruled out of order if it uses, if the question is offensive or objectional, or uses objectional expressions, or is defamatory. And I rule that since the matter actually deals with the reputation of someone, being Director Kane, that I rule the matter as being out of order. Your next question, your final question?
Yes, as a general question then, does CEO Kane, has he given instructions for certain ratepayers and residents who are trying to contact people through their direct councillor emails, intercepted those emails or stopped those emails from receiving at their place where they were sent?
Aren't you well aware of that answer already?
I'd like it on the record.
I don't think we're going to mind putting it on the record. Director Kane, CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In accordance with the City's policies, as you'd be aware, Mr Aldridge, we have a practice that, if necessary, some individuals are placed on a managed service basis. This restricts the form of communication, action and access to the City, in which case that is to the office of the CEO, in the case of my PA. All communications coming that are registered and a response is provided to any form of communication.
Thank you, Mr Aldridge. Is there anyone else?
Do I get a third?
Sorry?
Do I get my third question?
You had your
Please?
third question.
Okay, I only counted two.
No,
Sorry.
you asked 3 questions. So your second one was ruled out of order, but you certainly asked a question and it was ruled on. That was your third question and the final question.
Can I have a third question?
Not a conversation, Mr Aldridge. I've ruled that you've asked your 3 questions. Please sit down.
Thank you very much for your time, Council.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to ask a question from the floor before we move on? Thank you. I'll close question time now. Question time is closed at 6:18 p.m. Thank you. We will move on to confirmation of minutes. Ordinary Council meeting of the 14th of December 2021. The officer's recommendation is on page 3 of the agenda and is currently on screen. And I have a declaration of interest from Deputy Mayor Kunza. Deputy Mayor, did you want to read the disclosure to the meeting?
I'd be delighted to, Mr Mayor. The nature of the interest is impartiality. CC 05621 in the annual report outlines a complaint against me as determined by the Local Government Standards Panel. I successfully appealed the sanction at the State Administrative Tribunal, with the member ordering that the prescribed sanction be set aside and replaced with an order of no sanction. The extent of the interest is impartiality because the issue is a matter of fact and is simply correcting the record.
Thank you. Can I have a mover for the matter, please, for this item? Mover. Thank you. Councillor Spencer Teo. A seconder. Seconder, please, councillors. Deputy Mayor, thank you. We'll put the matter to the vote.
Sorry.
Councillor.
Sorry,
Spencer Teo.
I haven't done this earlier, but considering I'm also named in that complaint, I feel I should probably declare an impartiality as well.
You're talking about you were named?
In that particular complaint that we are speaking about.
The published complaint?
Yes.
Your verbal declaration is noted for the record. I'll ask governors to provide you with a form to fill out so that you can make a written declaration, but we will continue. Councillors, we'll put the matter to the vote.
The motion to confirm the minutes of the December OCM has been carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
Thank you, Governors. On to item 8 on tonight's agenda, The receiving of petitions, presentations and deputations, there are none. We move on to item 9, application for leave of absence. None have been received. Item 10, questions by members of which due notice has been given without discussion. There are none. Item 11, items brought forward for the convenience of those in the public gallery, and there are none. Reports of committee meetings, there are none. We move to reports at item 13. Item 13.1, reports from the Office of the CEO, there are none. Item 13.2, the Director responsible being Director Warren Bowe, the Director of Canning Corporate and Commercial. The item is CC 001 of 22. The item's subject is new lease, Axicom, 42 Lead Street in Cannington. The officer's recommendation is on page 5 of the agenda and is on the screen. Can I have a mover for that item, please? Councillor Bain. Thank you, Councillor Bain. A seconder? Councillor Spencer-Teo. Councillor Bain, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, I support the officer's recommendation, noting that Axicom is a long-term tenant and will enable uninterrupted communications within the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo, anything to add?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you. In the absence of any member wishing to speak against the item, we will put it to the vote.
Motion CC-001-22 is being carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
Thank you. We move to CC 002 of 22, review of the CEO's salary and performance review process, including but not limited to a review of policy AD 04. We have an impartiality disclosure by CEO Kane. CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm declaring impartiality interest in this item. On the basis of the declarations that I'm an applicant for the position of the CEO, I note for the record I have not been involved in any drafting or consideration of this report as part of the presentation of the item to Council.
Thank you. The officer's recommendation is on page 13 of the agenda and is on screen. Can I have a mover, please, for that item? Mover? Deputy Mayor, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Spencer-Teo. Deputy Mayor?
I've got nothing to add.
Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Nothing to add either, thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against the matter? In the absence of anyone speaking against the matter, we shall put it to the vote.
Motion CC-002-22 has been carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
Thank you. Item CC 003 of 22 is next on the agenda. The title of the report is Proposed Revocation of Management Order for portion of Crown Land 47898 in brackets Canvale Park. The recommendation is on page 20 of the agenda and is on screen. Can I have a mover for that item, please? I'll move the matter from the chair. Councillor Holland. Seconder. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor Holland.
Nothing further to add except that I support the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Likewise, I support the motion.
Does any member wish to speak against the item? Thank you. We'll put the matter to the vote.
Councillor Holland, I have your vote, please. Motion CC-003-22 has been carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
Thank you, Governance. The next item is CC 004 of 22, the title of the report being a monthly financial report of December 2021. The recommendation is on page 25 of tonight's agenda and is on screen. Can I have a mover, please, for that item? A mover? Councillor Bain, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Spencer-Teo. Councillor Bain?
I support the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Anyone wish to speak against the matter? Councillor Holland?
I have a question
Yep, go
on the
ahead.
warrant listings. How are we going as far as decreasing the amount of money that we're spending going to temporary agencies? I see it's still quite up. I don't quite understand. We were supposed to be bringing this down by now.
Director Bowe, are you
Can
able
I
to
have an
provide a
update,
response?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to revisit the response previously provided to elected members on this matter. It has been the administration's intention to reduce our expenditure across the business. There are a number of roles that remain vacant in critical service delivery areas. For example, in our waste management services, elected members have been briefed in relation to the current market conditions in the waste sector. Certainly retaining the access to labour hire is essential to enable the service delivery there. But I will provide a written response to the elected members, and we can provide some trend data in relation to the expenditure for temporary staff, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Holland?
Yeah, just one thing. If we're trying to attract staff, I just haven't seen a lot of ads on our website. Have I missed something?
You seek, Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, we're using a number of initiatives, including offering permanent roles to staff we recruit through labour hire companies, but we advertise generally on seek.com and not necessarily through our website.
Shouldn't we be putting all positions available on our website? Whether you can say, right, you go through Seek, but shouldn't all positions be put on there?
Director Bowe?
Yes, we can look into that and update the website, Councillor Holland. Absolutely.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the matter, councillors? If not, we will put the matter to the vote. Thank you. Let's put the matter to the vote.
Motion CC-004-22 has been carried unanimously with 9 in favour.
Thank you. The next item is CC 005 of 22. The report title is Endorse Submission to WALGA on Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries on Proposed Local Government Reforms. The officer's recommendation is on page 68 of the agenda and is on screen. Can I have a mover, please, for that item? It'll be Deputy Mayor Kunza, seconder. Councillor Spencer Teo. Councillor Kunza, I understand you wish to move an amendment?
Mr Mayor, I speak in favour of the officer recommendation. It's good to see some of the proposed changes, while some I don't really agree with. For example, the introduction of preferential voting. Every single election, the local government minister dusts off the same media release and talks about how it's crucial that voters participate and that we need to get the percentage of people voting up. And the introduction of preferential voting is a step backwards in my mind, and I'm glad to see WALGA talking against it. Some people may say it meets political objectives, but I believe it will lead to fewer people participating and an increase in the number of informal votes. But I really hope that the state government this time takes the feedback from WALGA and from local government seriously. And I'm pleased to see various reforms to the standards panel system, even though I'm a bit unsure about how some aspects will work in reality with the level of detail provided. I believe one of the most prominent areas of change is respect to 1.6, vexatious complaints referrals. That's something that's greatly required, but as you just mentioned, Mr Mayor, I'd like to propose an amendment just to add an extra point into the city's submission.
Can I just ask, have we got the amendment? We do. I will need so Deputy Mayor Kunza is proposing an amendment to add another dot point to the city's recommendation. I will need a seconder for that, please.
So I'll just read it out first. Basically, submission B and then the new part is subject to the following modification. Amend the city's response to part 1.6, vexatious complaint referrals, of the submission to include to ensure a provision exists in cases where the inspectorate rules a complaint as vexatious, that the details of the complaint, including the complainant and the inspectorate's ruling, to be included in the complaints register published on the local government's website.
You happy with that, Councillor Kunze? That's
Yeah.
exactly how you... Okay, thank you. Seconder. Councillor Spencer-Teo is seconding the amendment. Deputy Mayor, I'll invite you to speak only to your amendment, please.
Yeah, so for those who are unaware, there are currently provisions that prohibit the disclosure of information where a complaint is deemed to be acting in a vexatious manner. So with respect to the Local Government Standards Panel system, a complaint submitted by a person that is deemed to be vexatious is kept confidential. A person may submit various complaints against councillors, even though the adjudicating body determines that the complaints are vexatious, they're kept hidden. It's a similar case for those, for when people are submitting a deluge of FOI requests. As staff notes, there are currently no provisions to deal with it, but also it's kept hidden. The system is such that a person can pursue their agenda of submitting many complaints to the Local Government Standards Panel, FOI requests, complaints to the CEO, complaints to the Minister, complaints to the department, and we wouldn't really know. Even though these actions can be costing ratepayers thousands and thousands of dollars, these complainants could be sitting in the gallery of any local government and no one would know. If a person is spending thousands of dollars with vexatious behaviour, instead of the local government investing into local playgrounds, the people have a right to know. In the interest of transparency, details of the complaints that are considered vexatious should be made public. Complainants displaying this behaviour should not be protected by confidentiality. Now, remember in suggesting this that an independent inspectorate needs to affirm that the complaint is vexatious. So it's an independent process, and it's not simply the local government making a determination that a person is acting in vexatious behaviour. Council previously debated vexatious behaviour in a previous motion, but I just want to make the point very clear that our local government isn't the final determiner. It is an independent inspector. So if somebody is acting in that behaviour and that's been determined, then I think it should be made public. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo?
Can I just ask a question first?
Yes, of course.
Just going on by what Deputy Mayor was saying, do we still get charged a standards panel fee even if it comes back vexatious?
Every complaint that is actually registered against an elected member, there is a significant cost to the community, and any matter that is dealt with by the panel, whether or not it was actually dealt with as vexatious, my understanding is that that fee is apportioned to the local government. Thousands of dollars that will not be put into the hands of local community groups or go to grant funding or playgrounds. It's apportioned to the city. CEO, am I right?
Mostly, Mr Mayor, if a complaint is ruled from the outset by the panel as being vexatious and they don't consider it, that's the only basis on which they will not charge a fee. But the majority of them go for a full, as you've outlined, go through a full assessment, and therefore it costs the city the standard each case.
Thank you.
Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Yeah, so I support the amendment.
That's it? Look, I'll speak in favour of what is proposed. We're not talking about declaring people vexatious, and the reforms actually have a heading there, which is vexatious complaint referrals. They're asking elected members and members of the public to make submissions based on that question. And so that's what this is actually about. Unfortunately, we do have people in our community who have an obsession, an unhealthy fixation on elected members. And their ultimate goal is to cause harm and detriment. This is just going to affect those persons. It means that when people put in complaints that are quite obviously vexatious and have been submitted only for the purpose of causing harm to people, to harass individuals, then I think their details should be published online. I can't see any reason for that. Hopefully that might curb some of the behaviour. And also it's important that councillors realise this is not just about members of the public. Unfortunately, we're very lucky here at the City of Canning, but at times at other councils, it may actually be certain councillors that are actually acting in a manner that could be deemed vexatious against fellow councillors. So this is just to curb that. I don't think, I think this is a very worthy amendment, and I hope it will be supported, because whilst you may not have actually yourself been subjected to this sort of behaviour by people, I can tell you that when it occurs, it can have an extraordinary effect on those most affected by it. So I think it's a very simple amendment and one that should be supported. Anyone else wish to speak either for or against it? Councillor Sabiri.
Wanted to know what the officers think about this.
Sorry?
The officers, what do the officers think?
I don't think they're prevented from giving an opinion, Councillor Sabiri, on it.
I'm
CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, in principle, having some means of being able to manage and deal with the vexatious complaints is important. Currently, as the Mayor alerted or attested earlier on, we do receive or have received a large number of complaints which had no basis for consideration. That takes time and resources from staff to manage, and if we did have a process independent of the city for dealing with those, it would be beneficial.
We're hoping that through the reforms the government will actually mandate it, and we won't have to do it. It'll be by the government through legislation. Anyone else before we put the matter to the vote? Councillor Holland?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'll be speaking against it. This was brought up before, I think, by Councillor Sweeney wanted to use it, and then it was brought back up again to put the word back in again. I can't see how you can have one rule for one and one for another, which I think is happening here. I mean, if there's a complaint to the standards panel, a normal complaint, it's kept quiet, which I don't actually over-agree with anyway, but that's the rules. And it comes down to who is going to call somebody vexatious or not. Your definition of vexatious, Mr Mayor, might be different to mine. Your definition, CEO, might be different to mine. Whether somebody writes into this and questions something, it might come down to depending on how they worded their thing, whether they were a wordsmith or not, whether you thought it was frivolous or not. I don't see why you can do, I've got real concerns about the vexatious terminology as well, and who is going to determine it. I know Councillor Kunze said it was going to be an independent inspector. Well, I'm still not sure whether that's going to happen or not. If we're going to have that ruling on the website, then we on someone that somebody's determined as vexatious, but the complaint might not be. It's been predetermined that he's vexatious, but the complaint actually isn't. It's actually a very good complaint. So you're going to put that on the website as well? I can't agree to this, so I'll be voting against it. Anyway,
just to make a personal statement on that, and just to clear it up from what you said, Councillor Sweeney was referring to our internal complaints policy, and that was about vexatious people. This has got nothing to do with vexatious people. It's about each individual complaint is dealt with on its merits and whether or not the complaint is vexatious. So
Mr Mayor, your
vexatious
point
complaints.
of order, Mr Mayor, you've had your say.
No, I'm not. I'm making a personal statement under the standing orders, because you've actually said that what I said was incorrect. I referred to, when I actually spoke, I referred to the matter about complaints, not vexatious people.
Well, then you've corrected me on that, but you can't go on any further about it.
I have. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Hardeep Singh.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to speak in favour of this amendment. It is good to have the inspector rule out any vexatious complaints. As you mentioned, some people in our community have the obsession of accusing councillors without any proof. So it will be good not to waste ratepayers' money and rule some complaints out which do not have any grounds to be progressed further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a question for the city. What are the protocols surrounding putting up or publishing the names of residents on our website? Thank you.
CEO, as the complaints officer, are you able to make comment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The protocol currently is dealt with by the section of the Act, I think it's 5110, that deals with the elements of what get published on a complaints register. For this particular reference to go forward, it would be necessary for those elements of that part of the Act to be amended as well. The current protocol is the complaint against the elected member is published, but not the details of who the complainant was.
Councillor Bain.
So currently, we're not allowed to publish a resident's full name or details on our website regarding any matter.
CEO.
Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. No, you can publish details of individuals. We refer to them during the minutes, etc. We ask the people here tonight their names and their addresses, so all of that can go into the public domain. In terms of this specific requirement for a complaints register, the Act is quite clear. It specifies certain things that get published. The nature of the complaint, when the complaint was determined, what the finding was and the sanction. It doesn't have any provision currently for the publishing of who made the complaint.
Just a question myself, CEO, though, on the department's own website, though, it doesn't the register on the department's own website list the name of the complainant for each matter, where a sanction has been upheld?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You can go to the department's website and they both publish in the decision and in the findings for each matter the person who made the complaint, and that is a public document. So they don't actually publish in the summary of the sanctions the name of the individual, but if you go into each of the individual documents, you'll see the names of the individual who made the complaint.
Deputy Mayor, you wish to ask a question?
No, correction. Forgive me. The Act changes last year. It includes the person in the complaint. If you go to our complaints register, it's got the names of the person that made the complaint.
CEO?
It's in the Act.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll stand corrected. Well, I was just looking today at it and I couldn't remember seeing that particular element in the aspects of it, but if that's the case, so be it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak before I ask? It's only on the amendment at the moment to the item. Before I ask the Deputy Mayor to close. Deputy Mayor, I'll therefore ask you to close, please. Can I ask you to restrict to rebuttal only? And this is only in relation to your amendment.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I just, you touched on it in your commentary, but just to reaffirm that in response to Councillor Holland's comments, that it's not determining a person as vexatious. It's the whole section is vexatious complaint referrals. Everything is about the complaint. If a complaint is deemed vexatious, it should be published on the website, in my belief. Just as if a complaint is found to be substantiated, it is published on the website. And also with respect to the commentary associating this with the internal complaint system, again, I make the point that the whole proposed system is for an independent adjudicator, inspectorate, to determine, to assess the local government's decision-making. To say that that's a reason to not proceed with this, it doesn't wash with me. It's a completely independent process and nobody could question that the complaint was valid. It's gone through several processes and determined to be vexatious, and then that's upheld. So I believe that, as I said before, it should be made public and it shouldn't be hidden with confidentiality. And I ask for my fellow councillors to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I will now put the matter to the vote. We are only voting on the amendment, whether or not we agree that Councillor Deputy Mayor Kunz's amendment should be made part of the substantive recommendation. So councillors will put that matter to the vote. Just the amendment.
The amendment to CC-005-22 has been carried, 8 in favour, with Councillor Holland voting against the amendment.
Thank you, councillors. The amendment now forms part of the substantive recommendation. I have Deputy Mayor has moved the substantive motion. Councillor Spencer Teo was the seconder. The Deputy Mayor has spoken already to the matter and then put an amendment. I'll invite Councillor Spencer Teo if she wishes to add anything to the substantive recommendation. Councillor Spencer Teo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to take this opportunity to encourage my fellow elected members, if you haven't already done so, to take the time to provide your own individual feedback, as many of these proposed reforms will impact us directly. What we're endorsing today is basically administration's views. So I think it's really important that we also have our own. We have until 5 o'clock on the 25th of this month, so obviously you don't have to provide feedback on every single item, but certainly those ones that affect you, it would be good to have an elected member's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the matter? In the absence of anyone wishing to speak against it, I think we might just put it to the vote. Councillors, we'll put the matter to the vote.
Substantive motion is amended CC-005-22 has been carried unanimously with 9 in favour.
Thank you. We move to CC 006 of 22. Title of the report being Budget Review as at 31st of January 2022. The recommendation is on page 73 of tonight's agenda and is also on screen. An absolute majority is required for this item, councillors. Can I have a mover, please? A mover, Deputy Mayor. A seconder. Councillor Holland. Thank you, Councillor Holland. Deputy Mayor.
Nothing to add.
Councillor Holland.
Nothing further to add except that I support the motion.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the matter? Oh, Councillor Bain.
Just a question, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yes, of course.
Can the city provide some further information in regard to the 413,000 reduction in forecast expenditure on the Ken Street Weir project? Thank you.
Are we able to provide a response to that tonight, Director? Thank you. Acting Director?
Mayor, we'll take that on notice and respond to Councillor Payne.
We'll come back to you with an answer. Thank you. Councillors, will put the matter to the vote.
Motion CC 006-22 has been carried by absolute majority with all 9 in favour.
Thank you. We move to CC 007 of 22. Title of the report being Monthly Financial Report, January 2022. The officer's recommendation is on screen. It also appears on page 93 of the agenda. Can I have a mover for that item, please, councillors? I'll move it from the chair. A seconder. Councillor Spencer Teo. I've got nothing to add other than I support the recommendation. Councillor Spencer Teo.
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add. Councillors, anyone wish to speak against the matter? Thank you. We'll put the matter to the vote.
Motion CC-007-22 has been carried unanimously with 9 in favour.
Thank you. We move to CC 008 of 22, the title of the report being Proposed Acquisition and Dedication of Alanya Close in Cannington. The recommendation is on page 131 of tonight's agenda and is also on screen. Councillors, can I have a mover for that matter, please? Councillor Bain, thank you. And Councillor Spencer Teo is the seconder. Councillor Bain?
I support the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer Teo?
So do I. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Anyone wish to speak on the matter or speak against the matter? No. Councillors, let's put the matter to the vote, please.
Motion CC-008-22 has been carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
Thank you. We move to the 13.3 of tonight's agenda. Mr Graham Bride, the Director of Canning Development, is the responsible officer for the following reports, the first of which is CD 001 of 22, the report title being Final Adoption of Local Planning Policies LP01 Residential Development LPO 2, publication consultation of planning proposals, and LPO 7, advertising signs. The recommendation is on page 138 of the agenda and is on screen. Can I have a mover, please, for that matter? Councillor Sabiri. Thank you, Councillor Sabiri. A seconder? Councillor Spencer-Teo. Councillor Sabiri.
Support the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer-Teo.
As do I. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Anyone wish to speak on the matter or speak against it? Thank you. We'll put the matter to the vote.
Motion CD-001-22 has been carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
The next item on the agenda is CD 002 of 22, the title being Final Adoption of Local Planning Policy LPO 9, Tree Retention and Planting Development. The recommendation is on page 176 of the agenda and is on screen right now. I have a proposed amendment by Councillor. Can I have a mover, please? The mover will be Councillor Bain on this occasion. The seconder? Second will be Councillor Spencer-Teo. Councillor Bain, did you want to just speak quickly to this, or did you want to go straight to your amendment?
We can go straight to the amendment, Mr Mayor.
I understand you've been working with the City on the amendment and they have it already prepared.
Yes, that's correct.
Is that the amendment on screen now? Are you happy with that? Can I get you just to read through that and make sure you're happy that that's the manner in which you want it proposed?
That's correct, Mr Mayor.
Can I have a seconder, please, for the amendment? I'll move the amendment from the chair then. Sorry, your hands are a bit slower than mine. I'll move the amendment from the chair. It seems Councillor Bain, I'll get you to speak to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I respectfully ask for my fellow elected members for their support for the inclusion of grass trees in this policy, specifically the section which refers to trees worthy of retention. Grass trees are ancient and uniquely Australian. They are also iconic and the epitome of the bush landscape. They are of high heritage, environmental and cultural significance and value. Most of the species of grass tree are extremely slow growing, including Xanthera pressii, the species endemic in Canning. They have a lifespan of up to 600 years and grow up to 5 metres in height. They are extremely slow growing, taking 20 years just to establish a trunk. They then grow at an average rate of 1.5 to 2 centimetres per year. The proposed policy currently puts forward that for a tree to be considered worthy of retention, it must be at least 3 metres tall. A grass tree at this height would be getting close to 180 years of age. Therefore, those below this age and height, though they may be over half a century in age or more, they would not be considered worthy of retention. I humbly request that this amendment be included in LPO 9 in order that grass trees 60 years and above also be preserved given their advanced age and established value to the environment and community. Thank you to my fellow elected members for considering this amendment. I hope that it receives your support. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll only speak to say that I fully concur with the comments by Councillor Bain. Thank him for proposing the amendment, which I believe is supported by staff, and I also hope for Council's endorsement of the support of this amendment. I think it's a very worthy amendment. Anyone else wish to speak on the matter or against it before we put the amendment to the vote? Thank you. We'll put the amendment to the vote, councillors. This is just on the amendment.
The amendment to CD-00222 has been carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
Thank you. The amendment has been passed as is recorded and now forms part of the substantive recommendation before Council. I have Councillor Bain actually move the matter. Councillor Spencer-Teo also she seconded it. Councillor Bain, you've already spoken. I'm not sure you've got anything else. You can't speak again. Councillor Spencer-Teo, have you got anything you wish to add before we put the matter?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Does anyone want to speak against the matter or speak to it before we put the matter? Thank you, councillors. We'll put the matter to the vote.
Substantive motion as amended CD-00222 has been carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
The next item on the agenda is CD 003 of 22, the report being initiation of scheme amendment number 7 to local planning scheme number 42, land use permissibility modification from a use not permitted being X to discretionary D in the table 3 zoning table. The officer's recommendation is on page 187 of the agenda and is on screen. Councillor Holland, you're wishing to move the matter. Thank you. A seconder? Councillor Sabiri. Thank you. Councillor Holland?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I move the motion. I'm in favour of it. This gentleman gave a deputation last week and told us a lot of things that we hadn't known before. It's going to give him pretty well exactly what he wants, that he can have his garden centre. The guy's gone through the hoops with us, which we've admitted actually. There's the water sort of table under there or something as well, which he's got the approval from the Water Authority as well, which comes to answer some of the concerns. But he's been shoved from pillar to post with us. He spent a lot of money. We've had no problems admitting that this has happened. I'm not just saying it out of thin air, because it has happened. I think we should be supporting him here, let him get on with it. He's still got a lot of hurdles to go to, and it's still got to come back to council later on anyway. Isn't that correct?
Director Bride?
Yes, Mr Mayor, it would have to come back to council for final approval after the advertising process.
So I think the best thing we can do here is support it. So I hope you see a way to support this gentleman and help him on with his way. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Sabiri?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on the matter? Against? No? Let's put the matter to the vote. Thank you.
Motion CD-003-22 has been carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
The next item is CD 004 of 22, the report title being City of Canning Dog Amendment, Local Law 2021. The recommendation is on page 222 of tonight's agenda and is on screen. Can I have a mover, please, for that matter? Mover? Councillor Spencer-Teo, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Holland? Councillor Spencer-Teo?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Councillor Holland?
Nothing further to add except that I support the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the matter? Can we put the matter to the vote? Thank you, councillors.
Motion CD-004-22 has been carried by absolute majority with 9 in favour.
We're now at item 13.4 of tonight's agenda. The Acting Director, Canning Environment, Mr Ashley McKinnon, is the responsible officer. First item being EN 001 of 22, community consultation and adoption of the draft dog spaces strategy. The recommendation is on page 208 of the agenda and is on screen. I understand Councillor Spencer-Teo may wish to put an amendment. Can I have a mover for that item, please? Councillor Spencer-Teo, a seconder. Councillor Singh, thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I might just go straight into the amendments if that's okay.
Yeah, you'll only be able to speak to the amendment then, but yes, go ahead. So the amendment is on screen, councillors. So Councillor Spencer-Teo, I understand you've been working with staff. I'll just get you to read that and make sure that you're happy with the way it's been presented.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll ask for a seconder for the amendment. Councillor Parkinson, thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo, did you wish to speak to the amendment only, please?
Sure. Firstly, I really appreciate the work that's been put into the dog spaces strategy, and I'd like to thank staff for their work and also the community who took the time to provide us with feedback. It's safe to say that Canning has certainly changed over the last 20 years. When you look at how many parks with playgrounds which are actually also dog exercise areas, in some suburbs there is an incredible imbalance. Take Rossmoyne for example. There's not as many homes with dogs as there used to be. I think it may also be safe to say that there may not be as many responsible dog owners either. Due to infill and the changes in demographics in areas like Rossmoyne, we need to have a better balance of dog on and off leash areas. Rossmoyne does not have one park with a playground that is not a dog off leash area, and not one of these playgrounds have a fence around it to keep dogs out. I know it's really hard to comprehend that some of our residents don't like dogs or feel safe around our four-legged friends, but the purpose of this strategy was to seek feedback from those who own dogs and also those who use parks without dogs. I'm really pleased that a review of the dog exercise areas will be taking place as an outcome of this strategy. However, we can go one step further. A few of the playgrounds that have been recently upgraded or that are on the schedule for upgrade originally had fencing around them, but as part of the upgrades, these have been removed. Design options haven't included the replacement fences, probably due to the cost. However, if one of our objectives of this strategy is to provide a balance, then we should give our communities options of fencing when using playgrounds. Yes, it may compromise a level of upgrade or it could limit the amount of playground renewals, but I believe this is far better to be proactive rather than have to seek additional funding later down the track when we have our residents complaining or worse yet have children being harassed by dogs while they're playing on our playgrounds. By supporting this amendment tonight, fellow councillors, we're giving our communities the opportunity to be more involved in the decision-making process and to choose what is best for their local parks and reserves. After all, who's going to know better?
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson, would you like to speak?
No further comment to make.
You support the amendment?
Support the motion.
Anyone else wish to speak, either for or against? Councillor Holland.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'll speak against it. I'm extremely concerned with the number 4 there. Request the Chief Executive Officer that from the 2022-2023 financial budget, the playground renewal program includes fences in the design options. We haven't had this budgeted. We do not know how much this is going to cost, and it seems to go to all parks or playgrounds that haven't currently got a fence around them to exclude dogs. That's every single one in the City of Canning. This will be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we don't know about this. We haven't had a costings, we haven't had anything on it. We haven't had it's going to go completely against the long-term financial plan. If we include this, it will have an extremely bad effect on the next year's budget because the fences are not cheap. We put fences in before. If you remember, Mr Mayor, we put some fences in some of the Canning Vale parks where we had to, which was actually a couple of them to create dog areas were actually yours, Mr Mayor, your motions, but which is quite fine. I'm not saying anything wrong, but there was quite a cost that was attributed to those to put the fences. Here it would be totally irresponsible to be putting something in there where we've got no idea whatsoever how much this is going to cost. There's no budgetary thing put forward at all. It's got to have a detrimental effect to the long-term financial effect. It can't help but it. So if you're going to put all the fences around every dog park, you're going to have to take the money around from somewhere. Now we've got a long-term financial plan that we've put in place to get us out of the situation that we're in economically. And now this won't be hundreds of thousands. I would be envisaging that it could be a hell of a lot more. Every single playground to have a fence around it. That includes a couple around my area. They're just little playgrounds which the dogs are allowed to go. No one's ever complained. There's never been any bites or anything like this. That will also mean you'll have to have a different sort of fencing, a fencing within a fencing around places like Rostrata, where it's off-lead. You'll have to have fencing around places on the Shelley foreshore as well to keep where it's off-lead. There hasn't been any investigation into this or whether everybody wants it. You were saying that, look, we should listen to our ratepayers on this. We haven't listened to any ratepayers from any other place outside maybe Rossmoyne. I can tell you now, some of the parks, you've got a park down there near the church in Rostrata, so we'll have to put one around there. That's a dog off dog lead area. You're going to have to put a little fence around 2 parks in Rostrata. two parks on one of the ones that actually, Mr Mayor and Deputy Mayor, that you were involved with the creation of that park. I just can't remember. Sorry? Sir Albert Jennings, that will have to have one. There's another park just up the way from that. That will have to have another one. This is going to be hellishly expensive. Now, Sir Albert Jennings, for example, is a reasonably large area. Do you have the park around the barbecue area as well, which is a little bit away from the playground? So the fence is going to be massive there, and it's going to look horrible, in my opinion, but we've got no budget here. We've got no budget estimates, nothing. To me, it would be completely irresponsible if we did that. Have it come back and have it looked into by all means and get some budget estimates on what it's going to cost, but we can't, as councillors, put this through without having some sort of costings. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Look, I wasn't planning to speak, but I will speak. Look, with respect, Councillor Holland, I think you've completely missed the intent of this. I don't agree with any part of what you just said. You sounded unequivocal that we'll have fences around every park. All this is asking for is that we include fences in the design options, that we just put it as an option. So at the moment, right now, at this moment, we are consulting with our community about playground renewals at Canning Vale, Ferndale, Rossmoyne, Willetton and Wilson. We're asking residents, community consultation on our website, have your say Canning, what would you like to see there? So we're going to actually provide in the options that if people would like to see it there, that one of the options might, one of the design options might be a fence around that park. It'll be then up to the city and those residents to decide whether or not they think in that one instance, and it'll be on a case-by-case basis, whether or not that particular park should have a fence around it. So that's all this is. Yes, you're right, it's unbudgeted. It's unbudgeted because we haven't done our 2022-23 budget yet. We're about to sit down in probably March, I'd expect we'll start to talk about these things, and that's when we will be able to determine at that stage how this would fit into the budget, how much it might provisionally cost, and that's why it's not irresponsible, it's absolutely responsible. If it was to start right now, if Councillor Spencer Teo had said that this is to start immediately, I would then get it because we don't have a current budget for it and that would be irresponsible. But working with the city, she's actually suggesting that it commence during the 2022-23 financial year, which is fiscally responsible because we as a council will be able to find out how much the cost might be, how that might impact on the budget, and we will make a determination as a council, as a group, whether or not we decide to actually continue with this. But I make the point again, this is not about putting fences around every playground in the city of Canning. It's only to include that as one of many design options. That's all this is. On that basis, and I also do make the point that all of us should know that not everybody is enamoured by dogs. I'm a former CEO of the Dogs Refuge in Shenton Park. I absolutely love dogs. I've just been to Mandurah for 2 days. We had 4 dogs staying with us. It was bedlam. But there are people in our community that are terrified of dogs, and we need to accept that. And so being part of a welcoming community is about acknowledging that not everybody might be exactly like us, and that perhaps it's not too much of a stretch that in a whole suburb we might think to have one park where perhaps people are quarantined from taking their dogs down there off leash. I think that's just being part of being a council that is representative of its community. And I hope that that's what we might do tonight. So I support the amendment. I don't see any issue with it. We'll have an opportunity to discuss it further when we get some projections during the budget process, and I really look forward to those discussions. Anyone else? Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support the amendment. Given that we are a highly multicultural city, not everybody is comfortable around dogs, especially young children. So asking our community whether they would like to have a fence included in the playground, and this is the playground, we are not talking about the whole park, just the playground around the children's play area. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on the matter? Deputy Mayor.
Can I just ask a question through you, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So I agree with the intent, the prospect of there's certain parks that should have segregation fencing. I just wondered, through you to Director McKinnon, Basically, at Margaret Harrison Park, Mr Johnson has been working with me and a local resident providing vegetation barriers. So, and whether or not the city might be able to consider that also as part of a design option. So I don't know what the official name is, but it's Ardanthos sericurius, and it provides a really good separation, and whether or not that would actually be possible to also include in the design options where appropriate to actually separate dogs from playgrounds.
Acting Director Ashley McKinnon.
Yeah, that would be acceptable to consider alternative fencing options, including native vegetation, in the review.
As a barrier?
As a barrier, correct.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, anything else?
I was just going to ask, would that be a potential minor amendment that I could ask for support, or would I then, or subsequently have to wait for this vote and then move an amendment myself?
I would think that would be a minor amendment, but I would ask whether or not Councillor Spencer Teo would actually agree that also including perhaps can I ask how we might describe that? What sort of barrier we might describe that as?
It's a natural vegetative barrier for animal ingression. I just would make one point to Deputy Mayor Coons. It will, if it's a design option that's selected, it will incur increased maintenance costs as part of our parks maintenance forward planning.
As it would be a hedge, and it might not necessarily be an adequate barrier for all animals, but Councillor Spencer Teo?
I did discuss this with Dion when I was talking to him about the amendment. My concern with that is if you've got an excited dog who loves to chase children, they'll jump straight over the hedge. But in saying that, I've never seen one before. Dion did mention the one that is going in at Margaret Harrison. So, I mean, I'm happy for it to be in there as an and/or rather than a... obviously, we don't want to present the community with 5 different options, one with a hedge, one with a fence, one with blah, blah, blah. So if it's an and/or, then I'll be okay with that.
Acting Director, is this something that needs to be subject to a council resolution, the addition of that design option for a vegetation barrier? Is that something that's going to be considered in any case?
Through the Mayor, it would be considered. If it's listed in the amendment and approved as an amendment, that it's considered as a review option, then the administration could consider that. I would say that we would always consider in the design review with the consultation with the communities that the context is taken into account in that consultation to ensure that the barriers are adequate in both the short and long term for the type of animals that will actually be used in that space.
Just for the sake of moving this along then, Deputy Mayor, with your indulgence, I might just think that you might wish to put that the playground renewal program includes fences and/or natural vegetation barriers in the design options and/or?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Deputy Mayor, is that consistent with what you're proposing?
Yeah.
As long as we have Councillor Singh and Councillor Spencer Teo in agreement that I'll make the decision that's a minor amendment. I beg your pardon? I just did, Councillor Singh.
Parkinson.
Oh, Councillor Parkinson, was it? I've got Councillor Singh. Sorry, Councillor Parkinson. You're right. Councillor Parkinson, would you agree with that proposed minor amendment?
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Okay. I'll then ask, yes, will be includes fences and/or natural vegetation barriers in the design options that are presented. I think that, are you happy with that, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I am, and I speak in favour of the amendment. Look, I recognise the comment about increased maintenance costs, but I don't really know, but the Adanthos sericius, have I said that right, Mr. Bowe? No? Once it's established, I wish I had a bigger photo. It provides a pretty significant barrier, and I think that that's something the city should be doing around playgrounds where there's dog parks, because not only provides that segregation, but it's aesthetically pleasing. I think it's, I won't say killing 2 birds with 1 stone, but basically it's providing a segregation, but also is improving the amenity in our playgrounds and our parks, and I think that's 2 big ticks. So. I don't envisage that every single park will have fences erected because some local communities don't like that. But then there's some playgrounds that it's prudent for that to happen, to segregate dogs and kids. So I think that this is a prudent course of action.
We might just exclude grass trees from the natural vegetation barrier, since it takes about 600 years to grow an inch. Thank you. Councillor, we have had Councillor Spencer Teo speak on the matter. Councillor Parkinson supported the amendment. We have made a slight amendment, which I have deemed to be a minor amendment. Has anyone else, Councillor Holland spoken against it, I spoke in favour of it. Does anyone else wish to speak on this matter before we put it to the vote? Thank you. Oh, sorry, yes, of course. Councillor Spencer Teo. Thank you, Councillor Holland. Councillor Spencer Teo.
Although you did most of it for me, Mr Mayor.
Sorry.
And thank you for
and
that.
just rebuttal too, please.
Yes. Going on what Councillor Holland was saying, that no one's complained so far. Well, we had Monty Square that used to have a fence that is a off-lead area. We removed the fence and didn't put it back, and we've received several complaints.
New Riverton.
As you mentioned, this is not going to be putting fences around every single playground. This is purely giving the community options. At the moment, we are not giving them these options. Fencing around a small playground costs around about $30,000. So if we budget $80,000, for example, for a playground upgrade, and $30,000 is in fencing, then it means there's $50,000 left over to upgrade the actual playground facilities. So some may have to forgo swings or equipment or slides for the fence, but I think and I believe that's the option that the community should decide, not us sitting here when we don't even know every single park and the demographics that visit those parks. So councillors, please understand that this is not putting a blanket order to put fences around every playground. It's letting our communities decide what's best for them and their playgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you. This is only in relation to the amendment, councillors, not about the recommendation as a whole. So just about the amendment, we'll put the matter to the vote.
The amendment to EN-00122 has been carried. 8 in favour. Councillor Holland voting against the amendment.
Thank you. The amendment now becomes part of the substantive recommendation. In relation to the substantive recommendation, Councillor Spencer Teo has spoken. She spoke to the amendment. Councillor Singh has already spoken as the seconder to the substantive recommendation. Does anyone wish to speak against the matter before we put it to the vote? Councillor Spencer Teo, have a question?
Yes, I have a question for governance. I sent through some minor errors in the report. I was just wondering, have they been reflected? Because I haven't seen it on the website as being changed.
Governance, can you recall having received that email?
Can I confirm, Councillor Spencer Teo, in regards to the number of the recommendation, like recommendation 13 and then the comments that were in that?
Correct.
Can confirm that they were corrected.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. In the absence of anyone wishing to... Oh, Councillor Singh, yes?
Just a question, Mr. Mayor, to the governance. If this is supported by the council, when are we looking to construct these dog parks? In which financial year? Is there a plan?
Well, the motion here before us is that from the 2022-23 financial year, they'd be considered as a budgetary measure, and then obviously they would be implemented in line with our play provision strategy. CEO, I might get you to comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The
Talking
question
about the implementation of when they might be built.
Indeed. Is the request or the question in regard to point 2 allocates 360,000 for inclusion in the long-term financial plan?
Yes, if it's allocated,
Yes.
when are we looking to construct these dog parks?
So through the chair, we have made provision in the long-term financial plan provisionally for the sum. Mr. McKinnon, you might remember the specific years. It's in the outer years of the plan.
Mr. McKinnon?
Through the Mayor, that's correct, in the outer years of the plan, and they are set within the context of other projects that are aligned to the areas being considered.
Did we get
so
a
they're
date?
not defined yet.
Sorry, when was
They're
that?
not.
What was the proposed
The years, the specific year has not been defined yet, Councillor Singh.
CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm pretty sure they have the allocations have been put into specific years in the plan, but Councillor Singh, I'll respond to you in writing tomorrow if that's okay.
Thank you. Councillors, let's put the matter to the vote. Thank you.
Substantive motion is amended. EN-00122 has been carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
Thank you, councillors. We move now to EN 003 of 22. The title of the report being Local Roads and Community Infrastructure LRCI Program Extension. There is a recommendation on page 221 of the agenda. It's on screen now. It would require an absolute majority required. I have Councillor Spencer Teo wishes to move an alternate motion, I believe. Councillor Spencer Teo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I've noticed that throughout the week we've all been asking a lot of questions regarding this, and I tried to nut a few out literally just before the meeting, but I'd like to move an alternate motion to defer this item to the special council meeting on the 24th of February. It's only in 9 days' time, but I still believe I don't have enough information to make the decision tonight. So if...
Can I get to governance, please, to put that alternate motion up on the screen? Can I get you just to read the motion?
Alternate motion is to defer this item to the special council meeting on the 24th of February 2022.
No, it's not an amendment, so any councillor can move an alternate motion. If I had allowed the matter to be moved and seconded, then it would be a procedural motion and require a mover to move a procedural motion that the matter be deferred. But since Councillor Spencer Teo has moved an alternate motion to the recommendation in front of us, it is treated as an alternate motion. It simply saves some time going through the rigmarole of having to move a seconder and then do the same process. No, you don't. Well, you do, but we will have to. This will be require a mover, which will be Councillor Spencer Teo. Can I just ask? That is the alternate motion, the alternate recommendation in front of you, Council. The Council defers item EN 003 of 22 to the special council meeting to be held on the 24th of February 2022. Normally the case would be if it had been a procedural motion, only the mover could speak to it, but in this matter, the normal debate will ensure, so everybody will get an opportunity to hear Councillor Spencer speak if the matter is actually seconded and have their own opinion on whether or not the matter should be deferred. So we have the mover to the alternate motion, which is Councillor Spencer Teo. Can I have a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Spencer Teo, I'll get you just to speak to your alternate motion, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As mentioned, I've sent through quite a big list of queries that have arisen as a result of this officer recommendation. I haven't received all the answers yet, so as I've mentioned, there's just some things that I'm not entirely comfortable with or ready to make a decision. So I just ask that we be given a few more extra days to allow staff to obviously respond to those queries and give us adequate time to consider amendments or to consider endorsing the officer's recommendation, etc. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Kunza.
I've not got much to say. I was just intending to put the matter to debate. I just have a question for staff. It's only 9 days. Is there any impact on this? Is it okay to delay it 9 days to then consider this motion?
Acting Director McKinnon.
Through the Mayor, Deputy Mayor Kunze, the Main impact is the deadline to complete construction acquittal of projects by the 30th of June this year, remembering that LRCI projects are in addition to the normal workload of the city. So projects, we have to go through a procurement phase and a construction phase and an acquittal phase for projects. All of these take time, so the main consideration is the time we have left between now and June 30th.
Deputy Mayor? Nothing further? Look, I'll just speak in favour of the matter, only because I noted even today Councillor Singh was asking a number of questions, and I know all of us, this is a really big decision and we want to get it right. It involves, Willerton, it involves, Queen's Park, it involves the whole city of Canning, and it's a big decision. I take on board what the acting director has said, but I don't feel that 9 additional days to consider the matter will be a deal breaker in this respect, and we do fortunately have a special council meeting on the 24th, which is only in 9 days' time. So I think it gives an opportunity for all councillors, if they've got queries, to get satisfactory answers from them and follow up, so that all of us feel comfortable when we come back to council that we are making the decision with all the information in front of us. So any councillor at any time can normally put a procedural motion to defer. It's actually probably a better alternate, because what it does is it gives us all an opportunity to speak about it. Normally with a procedural motion you cannot. So I do support this, but only because, as I said, it's a big decision. We've had a number of councillors asking questions that clearly would probably like a little bit more time to consider their position, and I think in the interest of good governance and sound decision making, we really should just take a little bit more time to make sure we come to the right conclusion. But I'll listen to anybody else that would like to speak to it. Councillor Holland.
Mr Mayor, I haven't got a problem with deferring it at all. To put that straight, I've got a problem with the procedure here. I'll voice my disapproval, and it will not carry any weight because I know how this is going to work. I can't. So from now on, if I had moved the motion, Councillor Bain had seconded it, and then
no one moved this motion.
Sorry?
No one moved this motion.
I know. But if I had moved the motion and Councillor Bain had seconded it, and then Councillor, just for the sake of argument, Councillor Kunza said, I want to do an alternate motion, he could not, could he? No, because it'd have to be procedural.
No, he can't, but he can move a procedural motion.
Yes, I know, he could do a procedural, and then this should have been done as a procedural.
No, it shouldn't have. You can't just arbitrarily say it should have. You're wrong. We've actually been through this a number of times, and I remember taking some time to explain it to you. We've actually had this exact same scenario happen at least a number of times that I can remember, and fairly recently, where councillors have actually put an alternate motion to the recommendation put by the city. It's covered by standing orders.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm saying
that
that I'm saying this alternate motion is to defer, which should have been what a procedural motion is.
No, you shouldn't. It can be any. There are actually, I think, 4 different procedural motions that can be put. This is just an alternate motion.
So the alternate motion in this one to defer could only be made by...
made by anybody. You could have made it.
But I couldn't do it after the motion was put.
No, that's right. You couldn't do it after the motion was actually moved and seconded. Once it's moved and seconded, normal debate ensures, but then it doesn't stop anybody at any point during debate, as long as they haven't spoken previously, moving a procedural motion. Councillor Singh, do you want to ask a question?
Mr. Mayor, question regarding the procedure. My understanding is an alternative motion or a foreshadow motion only gets considered once the substantive motion, which is the original motion, gets lost.
They're different. A foreshadowed motion is different to what has just occurred. A foreshadowed motion has to have a completely different intent, and the procedure is different. So this doesn't have a different intent. We're certainly just deferring it. Governance, can I ask you to try to succinctly just explain it? Have I just encapsulated?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you have succinctly encaptured that. I will say, with the foreshadowed motion, you raise a foreshadowed motion when you currently have a motion on debate. So you have a motion on the table that's been moved and seconded and being debated, and then a councillor may wish to foreshadow another motion which has a different intent, basically to negate the motion that is on the table. That's called a foreshadowed motion. Does that help you?
It's complicated, I know, but...
Just The reason I
procedurally,
ask
it's
this is because in this guide here, it says foreshadow in brackets alternate motion. So for someone like myself who's a new councillor, when we read and follow the guide, it means foreshadow and alternate motions are exactly the same as per this guide. So I request this guide needs to be changed.
Yeah, we'll have a look at that.
Yes,
Thank you.
it is, that is done sort of possibly separate to our terminology in the standing orders. So our standing orders do refer to a foreshadowed alternate motion, so I take your point, it does become confusing.
Thank you. Councillor Holland?
Mr Mayor, how does one, you first started by saying, Councillor Spencer T, I understand you've got an alternate motion. So she's obviously portrayed that to you. How does anybody else, if they've got a alternate motion, do that? And then would it be up to your discretion whether the alternate motion was
If
put?
I begin to read out the recommendation, I say recommendation is on page 232 of the agenda, and then I call for a mover. If you throw your hand up before anybody has moved it and said, and get my attention, and I say Councillor Holland, and you say Mr Mayor, before that occurs, I'd like to put an alternate motion. Entirely able to do that.
Okay, but in this instance you were previously informed?
Yeah, just like I was previously informed about amendments, as was governance. Nothing untoward here. Yeah, that's okay. Councillor Singh, another question?
Not a question, Mr. Mayor. I would like to speak against the motion. Is that okay?
You want to deal with it tonight and not...
Against the alternate motion.
Okay, so that's the amendment to actually have it heard on the 24th. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay, yep, go ahead.
I would like to bring this attention to our fellow councillors that LRCI Phase 2 grant has the deadline of 30th of June this year, hardly 4 months left. I understand that there are 4 items in the original motion. Item number 1 relates to LRCI grant Phase 3, which does have the deadline up to the next year, and we may be granted an extension based on Member of Parliament Ben Morden's comment. So to defer that item, it does make sense, but delaying any further LRCI grant Phase 2 items, which are due very, very soon, 9 days matters. We need to comply with those guidelines from the federal government, and I believe there is enough information available to decide on those 3 items. We can always divide the items into separate motions rather than doing a block voting on all 4, and then just decide on some where we have information. I agree with Councillor Spencer's comments that not all the items we have information on. Maybe we do not have enough information on 2 of the 4 items. We can defer 2. If we do have information on at least half of the items, it is good to make a decision on those items and have the administration progress with those items which are really poor on time, hardly 4 months left to actually do the construction. So please, I request everyone to consider that. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question of the CEO, I think in this instance, in regards to this LRCI funding, is it unusual for the federal government to actually extend the acquittal period if requested by a local government?
Mr Mayor, we would need to have substantively commenced the project in order to be able to seek some form of agreement from the government to do that. You need to be well down the track. If we start the project, say within a month of the deadline, then there clearly wasn't intent, the government say there clearly wasn't intent for you to complete the project in the timeline. So to pick up Councillor Singh's point, that there is some criticality in this, whether it's deferred for 9 days or not. Whatever the decision of council is, it's got to be that we can deliver the project within the bulk of that within this financial year.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Can I just ask then, Governance, in respect to the alternate motion, if the alternate motion is not endorsed by council, what then happens? Do we need to have the current officer's recommendation as a foreshadowed alternate, or it just fails?
Mr Mayor, my understanding, we have no other foreshadowed motion on the table, so this is a motion in its own right. If it is lost, without a foreshadowed motion standing by, that's where the debate will end.
You need to foreshadow that you need the officer's report.
All right, well then, now that we have a motion on the floor, as Councillor Holland correctly pointed out, I think we should, it would be remiss of us not to actually have the current recommendation as an alternate foreshadowed motion, which would then mean if the matter is not deferred, if Councillor Spencer Teo's motion or recommendation is not supported, then at least we have a fallback position and we can go back to discussing the current recommendation. So that will be my foreshadowed alternate motion. I can't hear you through your mask, I'm sorry. The officer's recommendation as currently on screen in the agenda on page 221 will form the alternate foreshadowed motion. Councillor Singh?
Question, Mr. Mayor. Even if this alternate motion is lost, my question is, we can still put alternate motions or procedural motions to delay individual items on the substantive motion if the substantive motion is divided into 4 substantive motions.
I might have to seek guidance. Councillor Singh's question was that even if this alternate motion is lost, can a procedural motion under the standing orders then be put to actually defer certain items in the recommendation, or are we required to defer the entire item? Governance?
At the moment, the alternate motion is to defer the whole item. If that is carried, that's the decision of council. That's where we rest. If that decision is lost, and the mayor's foreshadowed motion comes up, which is the officer's recommendation, then you can then request to deal with those parts individually. Does that assist you?
And then the next part is, once we deal with those parts individually, then we can defer some of those parts as an alternative motion. For instance, out of 4, we may defer 2 to the special council meeting, which we don't have enough information on, and we may decide on the 2 which we believe we have enough information of. Is that right?
Thank you,
Governance, I
Councillor
might
Singh.
just jump in there. Just looking at page 23, the standing orders, 10.1, permissible procedural motions. In regards to, let me see, in addition to the right to move an amendment to a substantive motion, a member may move any of the following procedural motions that include that the debate on the motion be adjourned. That would be on the motion, not on parts of the motion, is my reading of it. It says that debate on the motion, not on debate on aspects of the motion. Your microphone.
Mr Mayor, if you are agreeing to the request to deal with each part of the motion individually, then procedural motions could be called upon during those individual parts.
Okay, well, let's deal with one thing at a time. Okay, thank you, Councillor Singh. Let's deal with one matter at a time. So the first matter is the matter of the alternate motion. We have a foreshadowed motion on the table. So depending on how we go with this first alternate motion, we will then deal with the matter of the alternate foreshadowed motion, and then everything that Councillor Singh just raised can be deliberated on and decided at that point. Councillor Holland?
Just a couple of points, Mr Mayor. I'm not trying to be argumentative or anything like this. The procedural motion would not have caused this for a start, because it would have just lost and then we would have voted on it. But I can't see how we can split a motion. We can vote on 4 different parts of a motion, because this is going to come back to your argument to try and defer it or not defer it. Whether you can split the 4 parts of the motion on voting, but I don't see anywhere here where it says you can split the 4 parts of the motion and have 4 different procedural motions on each one.
And I tend
That's
to agree.
what I worry about.
I tend to agree with that.
This is one motion.
The standing orders allows any member to ask that individual aspects of the motion be voted on separately, but it doesn't stop it from being the same motion. It's still one motion. So I think we're going to have an issue with that. That won't. I'll have to make a ruling on it if we get to that point, but I do take your point. That's how I would read it.
I think did you understand that, Councillor Singh, what that actually means?
You can only divide the. You can only divide for the sake of voting. So if there was an issue with voting on 4 different aspects of the one motion, and you feel there might be differing support for different parts of the motion, items 1 to 7 or 1 to 3, a member can actually ask that, for that sake, that council vote separately on each one of those points, which we've done often. But it doesn't mean that it's 7 different motions. It's still one motion.
Mr. Bear, as per my understanding of standing orders, an alternate motion can be anything which doesn't negate the original intent of substantive motion. So the alternate, the amendment could be anything which doesn't negate the original intent. So the amendment could be that a motion, which is block voting, divided into 4 different motions. It is not negating the original intent.
I'll look at that in a moment. We need to deal with each item separately. So let's deal with this. Let's make this as less complicated as we possibly can. We have an alternate motion, simply that the matter is put off until the 24th of February, which is in 9 days' time. That has been put by Councillor Spencer Teo, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Unless there's anybody else wishing to speak. Councillor Holland?
No, nothing to speak. I would actually like definitive clarity on the delivery timeframe of this project. We're saying, you're saying, Acting Director, that it will extend it a bit and we're going to have tight timeframes. I think it really has to be definitive. Can we do this in the timeframes without losing any without the possibility of losing any fundings because we haven't delivered, which we've put projects back before, carryovers before, because we haven't been able to deliver them over the last few years. Are we going? And if we do that on this one, we're going to lose the funding. The other point a question I would also like to ask is, what happens if the federal election, with the federal election in 2 to 3 months, if the funding is withdrawn?
I think the question, last question first. I think the funding has already been put. I don't think the funding is going to be withdrawn. Am I right? If there's a change of government in April?
Through the Mayor, well, I can't speak for the government, but I would doubt, because it's been enshrined and it's in progress, so it's unlikely to be rescinded.
The first question.
Councillor Holland, each project, the required timeframe is different. We can't have absolute certainty over each project due to the procurement and delivery cycle, particularly in this construction environment. We can only note that in our estimation, some of the projects have become very tight in the timing to deliver those projects and complete them. I would note that under phase 2, most of the projects are what they call small grants. Therefore, 70% of the funding is contributed by the federal government on the first quarterly report, and the remaining 30% would be the component that would be at risk from non-completion.
Can I ask a further question? Just in relation to almost what I asked previously, I just find it hard to believe that if there were going to be issues with delivering these projects by the 30th of June, that the city hasn't already been to the federal government and asked whether or not this matter can be, the acquittal can actually be extended, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic, for goodness sakes, and procurement is tough for everybody right across the board and contractors. Has the city not asked any guidance in regards to acquittal from Ben Morton, the Minister?
Mayor, that's correct. The city has not requested advice on delayed acquittal of projects. From the December period, the projects were forecast to be able to be delivered within the timeframe, but it's now February. So we can certainly go back as a administration and ask that question to the federal government.
I think we need to ask the question. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but you've got to go back to the bureaucracy. You can't go back to the Minister. The Minister doesn't have the discretion with this. This is a decision of those who are actually implementing the management of the program. I think Director McKinnon's point is right, is that the risk for us, by the time we scope and go to tender with these things, we're running out of time.
Okay. Councillors, let's put the matter to the vote. Let's get this out the road. We've got an alternate motion that we seek more guidance, information, and come back on the 24th of February. Sorry, Councillor Spencer-Teo? Sorry, you wanted to speak? Yes, can you close on your amendment, please?
Thanks. I just wanted to add, councillors, further to what Councillor Singh said, it's 9 days. Previously, when we've had these LRCI funding, we've workshopped them. So we've had an opportunity as councillors to be involved in the decision making, and we've been able to advocate. We haven't had the opportunity with this. I tried to open that opportunity last week, but it didn't happen. So I do believe that it's worth taking that 9 days. We've got issues with, getting supplies from over east with the railways and things like that. So to me, a 9-day delay when we don't even know, from the government, as Mayor Hall said, we haven't even asked if we can delay the acquittal. So this will give staff 9 days to find out that information, and it'll just, I believe, really help us all. We can't obviously have an in-person workshop, but at least we can have one via emails and by asking questions of staff. So I do ask that you support this. It is only 9 days.
Thank you, councillors. Let's put this matter to the vote. Just on the amendment, the alternate motion.
Alternate motion EN-00322 has been carried 6 in favour, 3 against. Councillors voting against, Councillor Singh, Councillor Sabiri and Councillor Holland.
Thank you. And just on that, if I could just ask the Acting Director, McKinnon, can we try to get an answer as quickly as we can, perhaps through Ben Morton's office? I'm sure that he'll be able to get an answer for us.
Mr Mayor, as CEO has outlined, we need to go through the bureaucracy. There's a federal program administration protocol, and it is by email. I would note that the program guidelines are quite specific about there being no extensions, but we can certainly ask in context for an extension on the basis noted.
Thank you. The alternate motion has been moved and passed, adopted by Council. Thank you. We will rehear the matter on the 24th and hopefully have a few more answers to questions by that time. Councillors, in the interim though, I do encourage anybody that has further questions or seeks clarity on any of the matters included in that item to please contact the City either through the CEO or Acting Director McKinnon well before the matter comes back on the 24th. We move to 13.5, the Directorate of Dr Sarah McQuaid, the Director of Canning Community. There are no items from that Directorate. We move to motions on which previous notice has been given. A notice of motion has been received from Councillor Spencer-Teo, which can be seen on the screen. The recommendation is also on page 230 of the agenda. Acting Director, Canning Environment, Mr Ashley McKinnon is a responsible officer. The item is Notice of Motion NOM 001 of 2022. The item title is Review of Policy ET 520, excuse me, Conservation of Flora and Fauna, in brackets 2009, and request fauna survey and management plan for the Waste Transfer Station, Jandakot Eastern Link Road and Canning Vale Regional Sporting Complex lots. Councillor Spencer-Teo is the mover. Can I have a seconder, please? Our Deputy Mayor Kunza. Councillor Spencer-Teo, can I get you to please speak to the matter?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The first item of this NOM is pretty self-explanatory in that policy ET 520 is well overdue for review, and having 3 points in a flora and fauna policy that makes no mention of fauna is not exactly the best guide when making important decisions on how to manage the city's native animals on our land. Councillors, we're going to have several big development opportunities and decisions to make, valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. They're all going to come before us in the next couple of years. Many of these have varying degrees of impact on our native fauna. An extensive flora and fauna policy will help guide our decisions. Having a policy with these objectives means that we will have fauna impact studies and information before we endorse projects. Steps can be taken prior to land clearing to protect fauna rather than it being an afterthought or having situations like the Southern Link Road in where we could be returning millions of dollars in grant funding. The second part of this NOM has to do with the impact and loss of habitat should Council decide in a couple of years to go ahead with the Jandakot Eastern Link Road or the Canning Vale Regional Sports Complex. Unfortunately, this council has inherited the issues with respect to the estimated 300 Western grey kangaroos who are landlocked through no fault of their own, or ours for that matter, on this site. Back in 2014-15, while the city was under control of the commissioners, they requested a fauna survey on this site. It was revealed that this site was home to 7 mammals, 19 bird, 13 reptile, 2 amphibian and 65 invertebrate species, some of which are endangered or are of significance. It's been confirmed that an EPA report will not be provided for this site. The 2015 survey offered many recommendations of the management of the kangaroos and estimated a population of around 250. Given nothing has been done since, we are unsure of that exact population. The City of Melville have a management plan over Kenhurst Park and Jandakot have had a kangaroo management plan in place for years. What's Canning done in the last 7 years? I'm not here to lay blame. I'm here to try and find a solution to move forward in the best interest of every life involved. We were told recently that DBCA would not approve any relocation of Western Greys on public land. Well, how do we know this? Have we asked? Has an application been submitted and subsequently denied? Well, I've asked, and the answer, although was heavily conditioned, it wasn't an outright no. Have we investigated relocations on private land? As we speak, relocations of Western Greys are taking place that have been approved by DBCA at the cost of $750 per animal by an experienced, respected zoologist with a proven track record of successful relocations of Western Greys. This same zoologist can provide accurate figures of kangaroo populations and their demographics by using heat-sensing drones. And yes, you can get permits to fly over airspace of Jandakot for this exact purpose. Right now, we don't know how many kangaroos populate this site or their demographics. There are animal interest groups out there who will work with the city to find alternatives to culling. It is unlikely that every single kangaroo will have a positive outcome. However, we owe it to them to try. At the very least, I've spoken with licensed joey rescue personnel and they say they will take the joeys. They'll rehabilitate them and they'll relocate them when a suitable time comes. This report hasn't even explored these options. This information is going to be crucial for us to make an informed decision when the time comes. Having a recommendation based on a single failed relocation is not enough to justify the shooting of Canning's only kangaroo population. There have been so many relocation success stories and this could be one of them. Mr Mayor, I've got a couple of minutes remaining. Could I now ask for an extension?
Yes, but that'll have to go to a vote of council. Councillor Spencer Teo's got about 45 seconds left and feels she'll need a short extension. We will put the matter to the vote whether or not we allow her to extend. I don't think so. Governance, I do need a seconder. Deputy Mayor. Councillor Sabiri, thank you. As a seconder. Thank you. Just to extend Councillor Spencer Teo's 5 minutes.
The motion to extend debate time for Councillor Spencer Teo has been carried unanimously, 9 in favour.
Thank you. Continue, Councillor Spencer Teo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, councillors. Considering we have done nothing for 7 years, I believe we should give this a go. If the kangaroos only survive 12 months, it's 12 months longer than they would have had if we decided to cull them. If we can only relocate 50 kangaroos, it's 50 more that we gave the chance. We are also told that culling is the most humane way to decrease the population of kangaroos. And I apologise in advance for reading this out, but this is the reality, and this is quoted word for word from the National Code of Practice for the Humane Shooting of Kangaroos. It's in relation to the joeys. If the joeys is furless, the acceptable euthanasia methods are to apply a single forceful blow to the base of the skull, sufficient to destroy the functional capacity of the brain. Or another option is to stun the joey immediately followed by decapitation. If the joey has fur, a single forceful blow to the base of the skull is an acceptable method of causing death. I won't speak for you, my fellow councillors, but if I'm going to have decapitated joeys and blood of our native animals on my conscience, I want to know that we've explored every other alternative and spent whatever time and money is necessary to finding alternatives. This site is not just about kangaroos. The significant clearing of the Banksia woodlands will have a serious impact on the foraging and habitat for the endangered black cockatoos. In the past 7 years, we could have started planting Banksias in other areas on site to compensate, but doing nothing for so long has left us with the best part of the Banksia woodlands being wiped out should this road go ahead. A fauna management survey with recommendations will address all of these issues so we can start now before clearing takes place. We can take steps to reduce the impact on our fauna. We have the time. We could start a relocation program this coming winter and we could maybe see 100 kangaroos off this site by the end of the season. And we could have Banksia seedlings in the ground. Councillors, please don't be scared off by the $200,000. A lot of information from the 2 reports we already have can be used. We know which species occupy the space, we just need information to learn how best to manage and reduce the impact on them. Finally, when we're talking about $100 million projects, this would be less than 0.5% of that cost. And in my mind, it's money well spent knowing we didn't just take the easy road and we put the investment in and we did our absolute best. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer-Teo. Deputy Mayor.
Mayor Hall, I wholeheartedly support this motion and echo Councillor Spencer-Teo's comments. It's incredibly important that we as a local government ensure that we do everything possible to assess the environmental impacts before making a decision, especially when it comes to infrastructure projects. It appears, and it's a bit concerning, that little thought was given to the impact that the metro networks would have on the animals that live along the rail corridor, as has been demonstrated with the issues surrounding the kangaroos in Canning Vale. And I understand a similar, if not worse, situation is present along the proposed Ellenbrook route. Now, the endemic animals and vegetation that reside on the Swan Coastal Plain was here before us, and unfortunately we as a society have done a terrible job at proper planning that protects our flora and fauna. And this is demonstrated by the fact that local governments are now rushing to, including Canning, to invest millions and millions of dollars trying to improve our local environments. Now, I believe it would have been cheaper to properly plan in the first place. In the Canning Vale instance, it's unthinkable as to why proper consideration had not been given regarding what happens to the animals that live on these relevant sites. Now, I'm delighted to read in the officer comment in paragraphs 12, 13 and 14 that we're going to do this right. We can't be making decisions on any infrastructure in this area and other land parcels in the City of Canning without a proper fauna and flora assessment. A plan needs to be determined on how we're going to manage the flora and fauna before applying for grants. Now, with respect to any costs associated with this, I mean, Councillor Spencer-Teo touched on this and described it well, but it's a drop in the ocean compared to what we're actually investing into the infrastructure projects. It's a drop in the ocean compared to what we're investing into improving our environment down the track after we've removed much of the vegetation, after we've impacted the animals. I mean, many of you know I volunteer with black cockatoos, and the amount of funding that's needed to try to provide them with a future is considerable. It's far cheaper and environmentally responsible to protect what you have rather than try to grow what you've lost. Now, I encourage my fellow councillors to support this notice of motion, and I hope it's unanimous. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Sabiri.
I, in general, support the intent that we are overdue and we need to review our policy. And I agree that we should request the CEO to review and present a draft policy by May. But really, why would you spend $200,000 of unbudgeted money on a survey that has no policy to support it? Shouldn't this wait till we have a policy in place? Animal-focused survey, it doesn't stack up scientifically. There is a reason that we, or experts, everyone uses the term flora and fauna together when we talk about nature. I won't get too technical about this, but really any review or assessment should take into account the flora component as well. So is there a reason we would not also do a flora assessment? In general, I understand the intent, and I support that we should have a policy come to council and then look at what we're going to do in our reserves and carry out surveys. But until that policy comes, I can't support this notice of motion. It's, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Singh, yes, go ahead.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor, to the administration. Do we do such surveys for every infrastructure project, or this is just for this project?
CEO, can I refer that question to you, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not aware of the history for the city. We would do fauna and flora surveys on those projects which had a disturbance effect. For instance, the proposed Southern Link Road would have had a fauna and flora survey on it. Scale, I'd imagine the Queen's Park football stadium would have had a significant fauna and flora survey on it. So anything of significance for a housing lot of minor subdivision, that's probably not required.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Oh, Councillor Singh, yes.
Follow-up question to CEO through you, Chair. So as per city's policy, is this project significant enough for this survey, or is it not?
CEO.
Expressing a personal view, I believe because of the area that's affected by it all, it would be significant enough to do a fauna and flora survey of the sites. As to the other elements of the notice of motion, I don't have a specific view on those.
Can I ask a question, CEO, to you, I think? I picked up on Councillor Sabiri's comment about flora, and I do agree with it. Just in relation to that, so this policy is already in relation to the policy ET 520 is for the conservation of flora and fauna. So when the draft policy comes back to council, whilst the focus of this motion appears to be more toward fauna, it already will be, the policy will already address flora in it. Is that the case?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you note, most of the references is made to fauna in this particular thing, but it is a policy which is about both flora and fauna. As Councillor Sabiri said tonight, they are not normally separated in terms of anything consideration. So a review of the policy would have to deal with both aspects of that. I know through some of this precinct we have some unique flora, such as the spider orchids, etc., which have been known to occur on the airport site, and as we did recently, we looked on the Canning Vale site for those aspects of the flora as well.
But just to confirm, the draft policy will be in relation, city will be, based on what's in front of me here, the city will be obviously putting to council a draft policy, which I expect will be workshopped by councillors on flora and fauna in the one policy.
That is correct. That's what the current policy is, flora and fauna, and the current policy in those two contexts would be reviewed.
Right. Anyone else wish to speak either for or against? Oh, Councillor Singh, yes. Sorry if I cut you off before, I apologise.
One more question, Mr. Mayor. council allocated in last meeting $250,000 to find alternatives for these kangaroos and not to cull them. Culling was specifically excluded. So doing this survey, I'm trying to understand what purpose it serves while we have already allocated money to find a good solution for those kangaroos. So please enlighten me.
Councillor Spencer-Teo, you might be best placed, since the motion is yours, to...
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This isn't just about the kangaroos, so that $250,000 was specifically for the kangaroos. This motion is about all the fauna that's on the site. So as mentioned, it doesn't just, the clearing of this land will not just affect the kangaroos, it will affect all of those other species that I listed as well, including spiders, lizards, possums, all of those other animals as well. So this is more of a holistic approach, whereas the 250 was specific to the kangaroos.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak against the matter or for it? Councillor Holland?
I've got a question, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Doing a review of the policy I think is a really good idea, but aren't we putting the cart before the horse? If we're going to do the review of the policy, but we're going to be put this before we've got the review done. What happens if the review comes back in contradiction?
CEO,
shouldn't we be doing the review first?
CEO, review of which I've had whispered to me. The review of the policy. CEO, did you want clarification on the question, or you?
No, I think I understand the question, because in this particular case, it is a generic review of the policy. However, it's been sought in regard to the specific areas that it's been mentioned, the waste transfer site, the Jandakot at Eastern Rink and the Canning Vale Regional Sports Complex. I think it would be important that we did a holistic, Councillor Holland, a holistic review of the policy, so it could be applied more generically, not just to these areas, but more broadly across the city. However, the review would also need to take, because these are very significant areas of potential conservation land, you would have to take these areas into consideration specifically.
Yeah, I understand that, and I agree with that holistically, totally. But shouldn't we be doing the review of the policy first? We haven't. The policy's out of date by a long shot. We're going to do. We're setting down to do a review of the policy, but we're preempting the review. That's what worries me.
I'm not sure that I understand that, because the very first thing says request the Chief Executive Officer to review policy ET 520. That's the very first point.
I know, but shouldn't we wait for that result?
To do what? Wait for the result of the review to do what?
Before we're putting down the number 2, request the Chief Executive Officer to engage a suitably qualified environmental consultant and so on and so forth, which is going to cost approximately $200,000, I think it was, sitting down here in number 14, to be done. But we're doing this before we get the review of the policy. That's what concerns me. Number 2 is going to be done, put forward before number 1 is done.
I think the engagement of the consultant will be part of the review, but CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd see the two being done as part of the same operation. First, the on-site fauna assessment, which is 1A, would just give us a better understanding of what the actual carrying capacity of the wildlife is in this area. The rest of it, I think we would simply be doing in conjunction with that. We would complete the review of the policy, would use an independent person to come back and give us guidance on that review. We wouldn't be spending any substantive funds on things like relocation or the like. We were doing the policy review first. I think, as also suggested, Mr Mayor, tonight, as part of that review, I would be recommending that we'd probably workshop that back with the councillors via the workshop or a SIB, because these are significant capital projects that also relate to this area. And so in terms of between now and May, we'll have to build that into the program.
I hadn't intended to speak on the matter. I will just speak quickly, only to mention, councillors, page 231 of the report, on this matter, only just that the city's officers actually support the notice of motion and give good reason for doing so, including at paragraph 9 specifically, the local biodiversity strategy endorsed in May 2018 outlines a 20-year action plan for the protection and strategic management of natural areas and biodiversity in the city. And in paragraph 10, one key action out of that local biodiversity strategy is to develop and adopt a policy to guide vegetation retention protection while facilitating future development, to assist with the establishment of effective ecological linkages between remaining fauna habitat and landscaping with suitable local species. And this policy review will specifically address this action. And that's been written by the administration, not by Councillor Spencer-Teo. So I think, for the reasons outlined and considering that the city's officers actually support the notice of motion and that it actually ticks off and supports a number of strategic intents of this council over the last number of years, I really think this is worth persevering with. And as Councillor Hollands rightly said, the policy itself is well overdue for review. And whilst there might be, finite, this might be over-prescriptive in some respects, I think it'll get the job done. And it's certainly, considering what we've all had to live through in local media in relation to kangaroos, and now that we know what's going on out there, we can only imagine that other fauna and of course flora, as has been correctly brought to our attention by Councillor Sabiri, needs to be holistically considered. And the review of this policy, which will come back to Council for its deliberation, and we will all have, I expect, input, because we do with policy. Well, I expect that we will have a SIB on the matter and be able to provide our own input into this. I'm really looking forward to the matter coming back to Council, because I know so many of us around this room really genuinely are respectful and have a great deal of interest in our natural environment. So whilst this might not be everything to everyone, I think it's a really good start, and it's up to us as a council to develop the policy in collaboration with the city to make sure that it is fit for purpose and then it does meet everybody's needs. So I too encourage councillors to support the motion put to council tonight by Councillor Amanda Spencer-Teo. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Holland.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'll speak now if I may.
Yeah, of course.
I'll speak against this on one issue only. I agree with the review of the policy and everything you were saying there, Mr Mayor. I totally agree with that. And it's got down here in number 3, request the Chief Exec present a draft policy to Council by way of a SIV on the May 2022 for the final policy coming to us on the June 2022. The point that why I can't support this is coming back to again which my questions were. I can't support it on number 2. We're putting this ahead before we get the policy drafted, before we've even had a SIB on it. We're spending money. This could be outside the policy. That's why we have a policy. We're having a policy review to do all this, which is great. It'll probably come back with the review and whatever environmental studies you do within that review, coming back and saying the same things as Councillor Spencer-Teo wishes, but I think we should be waiting for the SIB and the policy to come back. I think this is premature to do number 2 without having the number 1 done, which is what we're wanting to do. The policy will not come back until a SIB in May 2022, so I can't see why this can't be discussed after the policy is announced. That's not the way Council does it. We have a policy. We have a set policy. Now we're doing a review of the policy, therefore we should not be preempting the review no matter what that is. Oh, by the way, before we get that review, let's spend a couple of $100,000 over here on this, or let's spend money on this. And that's not being flippant, me saying that. This is procedural stuff. It's incumbent on us to do things according to the way things are set down, and we're responsible for this. And a policy is what governs local government, the various policies on everything. And that's why we should be doing a review, which I totally agree with. Totally agree with everything, pretty well everything's been said, but I can't put through spending the money before we've got the policy review done. To me, that's the horse before the cart. It's not disagreeing with the content of it, but you can't do it until we've got a policy or the policy review. We're saying do a policy review. Yeah, do it, great. But in the meantime, sorry, I can't support it in that specific terms. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. For the record, we do put the horse before the cart. Councillor Singh.
question, Mr. Mayor. In case the policy review, is there a possibility that the policy review will come up with findings which will stop us spending this money of $200,000 on this survey? Is there a possibility?
Mr. McKinnon, can I refer that to you? Are you able to answer that question?
Councillor Singh, it's unlikely that that would be the case.
Can I ask why it would be unlikely?
Through the Mayor, it's quite a normal part of the process in developing in a policy that active flora and fauna surveys are part of the policy process.
So that would be a normal part of the process?
That's
policy
correct.
Review. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Deputy Mayor?
Just based on what's been discussed, can I just ask a question to Councillor Spencer-Teo through you, Mr. Mayor? So my understanding of the notice of motion is that point 2 asks for a fauna and flora survey and a management plan specific for the lots in question, given the obvious issues at hand with the kangaroos, the metro networks, the proposed developments, and that point 1 is to create a policy and a framework so that we don't get to this situation in future projects where work has commenced, but we don't actually have a plan for what's happening with the animals. So they're not actually cart before the horse. Is that correct?
Can I just ask you to just keep your answer brief and not speak on the matter? Just answer the question.
That is 100% correct.
That's it, 100%. Councillor Holland, you had your hand up? No, thank you. Anyone else with a question or wish to speak against or for the matter? Councillor Spiri.
I have a question. Has there been any work on the area to have it revegetated by the city?
Acting Director McKinnon.
Through the Mayor, Councillor Sabiri, I believe there's been some work on on planning for the revegetation, but there hasn't been extensive revegetation works to date.
Further question? There's nothing
How many
coming.
reports do we have on this site already through different agencies throughout the last couple of years?
Councillor Sabiri, I would need to come back to you on the actual number of reports in relation to the subject sites.
Are you talking about all the sites on here? There's a number of sites that are listed here.
Yeah, all the sites
Okay.
in general.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak before I ask Councillor Spencer-Teo to close? Councillor Spencer-Teo, can you please close debate on your notice of motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are two reports that I actually know of, one being the 2015 survey that was done and one being the 2021 kangaroo management plan that was done, both of which reports were done without council resolution. I'd like to add, both of them were done by request of administration. So to sit here and say that we don't need these reports or that we need to have a policy first. Well, the policy that we have, like I mentioned, mentions nothing about fauna except the title. It is all about flora, which is exactly why I didn't put that in the original notice of motion, because flora is already covered in the policy. What I'm asking for is the policy to be reviewed to incorporate fauna, because it's not mentioned at all. Now, the reason why I would like this survey done before this policy is done, it's completely irrelevant to this policy because we had a kangaroo management plan done in June of last year. We didn't know about that until it was leaked. Now we know about it, I would like, call it a second opinion or call it a more thorough opinion of what can be done with the kangaroos on site. Part 1 of this motion is specific to fauna on the site. Part 2 is specific to the kangaroos. And, you know, obviously other fauna that is going to be impacted. So with respect to the timing, if we are going to relocate any kangaroos, it must be done in winter. That's from June through to August. So if we wait until we have this, we are a year behind, which could potentially delay the Eastern Link Road and the Regional Sports Centre by another year. So that's another reason for the timing of this. I'm really surprised at Councillor Sabiri's comments, considering she's been conversing with Lynn and Maggie on social media about the kangaroos. I've also been meeting with them and conversing with
I
them.
mean, point of order, these are really irrelevant, and I don't know even where you get these from.
Yeah, I agree.
Just totally
Rule it out of order. Can we keep
really
the
emotive,
personalities out of
really
it?
emotive.
Just stick to relevant facts. You're just rebutting here. You're actually introducing new material.
Sorry,
no
I
one
thought
spoke
I
to you
was
about social media. You weren't rebutting.
No, I thought I was rebutting what Councillor Sabiri was saying with respect to that, but that's fine.
Not, and I'll just ask you just to keep personalities out of it. No need to mention any other councillors. Just stick to the facts.
Okay, well then, based on what Councillor Sabiri said, then again, I suppose it's along the same lines as Councillor Holland in respect to why is option 2 needed. Well, basically it's needed because we've been recommended to cull the kangaroo. So this basically opens a door for other opportunities and other companies and not-for-profit animal focus groups to have their opinions and provide us with alternatives. It's as simple as that. So it isn't as complicated as what it may appear, and I do, for the sake of the fauna that's on site, the sooner we act, the better. So I do hope that councillors will support this in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. We'll put the matter to the vote.
Motion nom-001-22 has been carried. 7 in favour, 2 against. Councillors Sabiri and Holland voting against the motion.
The final matter tonight will be the following. It's Notice of Motion 002 of 22. The Director of Canning Development is the responsible officer. The title of the report being Accessible Parking and Disability Advocacy. The notice of motion has been received from Deputy Mayor Kunza and can be seen on screen. A minor amendment was submitted by Councillor Kunza in part 2 of the motion, and that can be seen in red type. Deputy Mayor, can I ask you please just to have a look at that? Do you accept the motion on screen? You do? That's a yes for the sake of the record. Thank you. Can I have a Deputy Mayor Kunza is moving the matter. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Spencer Teo. Deputy Mayor, can I ask you to please speak to your notice of motion?
Yeah, Mayor Hall. Look, I hoped this notice of motion would go before our December council meeting to coincide with the International Day of People Living with Disability, but for various reasons it didn't happen. But it actually doesn't really matter. It shouldn't just be about one day in terms of recognising or raising these sort of proposals. We should be challenging ourselves every day about the way we think about disability, not how we can drive change, how we can create an inclusive community, and also what meaningful ways we can impact people's lives. Now, it's hard to imagine what some people go through every day, and it provides great perspective. Around 1 in 6 Australians are living with disability, and it's important to note that not all disabilities are visible. You can't see invisible disabilities, yet they are very real. Around 4.5 million Australians live with a disability. Now, we've spoken a lot in recent years about disability and what we can do within the City of Canning to make things better for residents and visitors who live with a disability. Now, personally, I regularly converse with Willetton resident Doug McLean, who is a passionate advocate for helping those living in our community with a disability, as he supports both his wife and his daughter, who both live with disability. Now, for quite some time, Doug's been raising his concerns with the inconsistencies across Perth with respect to accessibility parking, and regrettably, he keeps coming up short. Now, this is an issue that directly affects him and his loved ones. And there's a number of reasons why there are these inconsistencies. The current arrangements are that there is no legislative compulsion to provide contemporary ACROD bays until a significant change occurs. For example, a change of use or development goes to the DA stage. Now, this has meant that some premises have not had the appropriate accessible parking for many years and don't intend to into the future for many years because they don't have any plans to redevelop. Now, many of us don't really think what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, but the lack of accessible parking may be the difference between somebody visiting a shop or a restaurant or not. At the very least, we here in Canning need to make sure that we have modern, appropriate, accessible parking at all our facilities. We can't talk up accessibility and inclusion if we're not meeting those standards. Now, I believe we need to advocate as part of our DATE process to Canning businesses and commercial property owners to review their parking and ensure that they are accessible, that they have accessible parking where appropriate. And lastly, I believe the state government should consider an incentive to help fund upgrades. I don't know the logistics. However, I know that our disability grants have proven effective in upgrading local facilities like the Rossmoyne Bowling Club that took the opportunity to access an accessible grant to make their toilet facility accessible. It's now enabled them to host wheelchair tournaments in bowls. But I think often the carrot is better than the stick, and look at incentives for people to actually make change rather than putting legislative compulsion necessarily to make them do it. Now, I respectfully request your support with this motion. It's not much of a burden on the city, but will hopefully lead to improved outcomes for those who need the support. And also he's not here today, he couldn't make it, but I just want to thank Doug for bringing this issue to me, but also for his advocacy over a number of years since I got to know him.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Spencer Teo, have you got anything you'd like to add in relation to this matter?
Just that I support this this motion wholeheartedly. As Deputy Mayor Kunza and also Doug has pointed out, we do have certainly some commercial properties in Canning that certainly could do with a review and provide more accessible parking. And I also believe it is very timely with the review of our DAPE as well. So I support this, and I hope my fellow councillors will too. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak either for or against the matter? Councillor Sabiri, sorry.
Thank you. I commend the notice of motion, especially the advocacy, even though I understand that it's largely outside of the council control. I'm wondering about, in reference to point 1 of the motion, is there actually evidence that our provisions of, I guess, parking bays, ACROD parking bays, are not up to scratch?
I think the report actually mentions that, doesn't it, from the city?
And yeah, I think I would be actually disappointed to know that this actually needed a council motion to happen.
Would you like me to? I'll just get an answer from Director Bride. Director Bride, just in relation to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the issue here is that obviously, depending on the age of the facility, that dictated at that particular time what the standard was, and the standard progressively changes and it's modernised. So buildings that were built in the 70s and 80s, their car parking facilities may not have even required a bay, or the bay didn't require a bollard and a larger area for manoeuvrability. So option 1, or part of the motion number 1, is about looking at all of our facilities and looking at the parking areas. Yes, they may have been compliant at the time they were built, so there's nothing illegal about them. But let's have a look to see whether, what the cost may be to bring that up to today's standard, so they're modernised to the current ACROD Bay standards.
Councillor Sabiri, did you want to say any more on the matter? Thank you. Anyone else wanted to speak? Councillors, we might put the matter to the vote then. I don't think we had anyone speak against the matter. Councillor Spencer Teo, I don't think there's any need to rebut. Sorry, Deputy Mayor, I don't think there's any need for rebuttal. Let's put the matter to the vote.
Motion nom-002-22 is being carried unanimously with all 9 in favour.
Thank you. Well done, councillors. Urgent business at item 15, there is none this evening. Confidential matters at item 16, there are none. And at item 17, there being no further business this evening, I now declare the meeting closed, the time being 8:28 p.m. No, I've got 8:28 PM, just before 8:30. And I would like to thank everyone for